Welcome, Matt Arends, to the Take Flyt podcast. Matt is owner and manager of Spring Lake Farm in Prior Lake, an organic farm. And Matt, I think you and I met maybe 5 years ago through mutual friends. And I think we were going down this path of starting I think you were organizing it, but going down a path of a human performance seminar.
Yep.
We're going to be doing monthly meetings of 12 to 15 people that would involve nutrition with my cooking, and then some mental performance coaches, and then try to create a subscription model and a well-being, what would you call it? Kind of a seminar of sorts. And I think that kind of just all got killed out during COVID, I'm sure. But then we kind of went our separate ways, and then we reconnected recently and found out that you are working on a farm and you own a farm. And That's something that completely shocked, because I knew you were into nutrition and the importance of food for our well-being, but to hear that you went ahead and started a farm, I was like, that is awesome. And I want to hear more about that. So maybe take us through what you're doing today. Tell us a little bit about the farm, and then we'll jump back a little bit and how you got to start in that farm.
Yeah, so Spring Lake Farm, I started it about 3.5 years ago. So this season will be the fourth full season. We sell produce directly to consumer. That's pretty much what we do. We work a little bit with the Prior Lake School District and then a few of the local restaurants in Prior Lake, but we do a spring, summer, and fall kind of veggie box program. We're at the Prior Lake Farmers Market. But yeah, we're kind of I would say, a different model of farming than most people are used to. I think especially in the Midwest, people think of farming as big tractor farming, but the farm that I operate is only about, I would say, a quarter acre of production, and we're producing for anywhere between 100 to 175 families a week, depending on the season. And so we're growing from pretty much February all the way up until Christmas. So that's 11 months out of the year in Minnesota with unheated greenhouses. We're doing microgreens year round, storage crops. And so we're really trying to bring the possibility that or at least bring the awareness around the possibility that growing food in Minnesota is not just a June to October thing, it's a February to December thing. Because I think a lot of people have this idea in Minnesota that the growing season really doesn't start until June, but with different kind of methods and practices, we can extend our season pretty far. And so we've been able to successfully grow for 11 months out of the year for 3 years straight now. So that's been a huge win. And then we are now kind of redoing our farm store, which is exciting because we're going to start to bring in other local products from local and regional producers to try and get more, I would say, of a true general store. And that's going to allow us to actually reach more people in terms of interest, bringing in meat from different suppliers that I know around the Prior Lake area, and just all the different products from personal health care, home health care, or home care. It's like Fresh Steeps, I think, is going to be, I don't know, I think you've probably heard of them, but I'm trying to bring in all these different local businesses and create kind of a cool little small food hub right in Prior Lake. So
it's kind of almost like a co-op of sorts, the kind of that model of you have with the local angle tied into it.
Yeah, because I mean, the biggest thing is I'm blessed in the location where I am because I'm about 4 minutes drive from downtown Prior Lake, which means I'm 15 minutes from 50,000 people. Whereas a lot of people don't have that lucky of an environment per se, especially producers who might be a little bit farther out, like even New Prague or Jordan, it's just not as large of a market. And so the idea is we're trying to bridge that gap and bring in products from elsewhere, to bring more traffic to our farm because it's great marketing and PR, but B, also work with those individuals and help their businesses succeed. Because I think the U.S. is just very far behind in terms of the local market generally. Whereas when you go to other countries, there is a large push for that local community to be investing into their businesses. So that's where I think it is a unique opportunity to really start to drive this forward.
Yeah, I love that idea. My prior career, I had a baby food business, and I used to work at farmers markets. I'd bring in my baby food to the farmers market down in downtown St. Paul, and I'd sell, but I'd be stationed right next to a guy that drove 2.5 hours with
Yep.
his, his frozen beef that he, kept in the freezer for a decent amount of time so he could preserve it and keep it, sell it at each farmer's market each week. But he,
Right.
like you said, he was traveling, he'd wake up probably at 3 o'clock in the morning, drive 2 hours to get to the farmer's market by 5, set up by 6 and ready to sell. And then he goes back and does the whole thing again. So there's like that ease of access and for these suppliers, it's really hard to get it to a wide, audience if you're living that far out. So for you to be
Right.
in Prior Lake and trying to create this model for the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, I think it's a great idea. And then to bring in, these other alternative products that aren't grown on your farm to help the other producers in the area to give them an audience that they might not otherwise reach. So I think that's, so what kind of products are you envisioning bringing? You mentioned some meat and, do you think like some shelf stable stuff too, or is it more?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll have we'll have different drinks, like Fresh Tea is a tea company,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a few other companies that I'm thinking of, but anything from like Edelberry syrup, like the fire cider, working with some of those companies, like the beef tallow cream, you can have all the different salves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have a super long list. All of a sudden I put a post out yesterday and it
Yeah.
was like
Everybody's
50
flooding your
people
inbox
responded.
with want to get on the farm now.
Yeah, so everything from honey to, because we're going to be expanding into fruits this year on my farm, so we should be able to supply strawberries, which will be good, but then there's a local apple producer, so it's a wide range of products that we're going to bring in, but essentially the idea was, can we just put it out to the community, see what they've been enjoying, and then start to look at, is that something that we'd be able to sell at our farm store, so.
That's awesome. So are you the intention to still do farmers markets, or are you going to be dedicated to farm as your hub?
No, I'll still be doing farmers markets. I just do the one Prior Lake farmers market, so it's not like I'm having
Okay.
to drive up to Minneapolis or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. That's kind of it's a big sales outlet for me. And so that one we'll continue to do for a long time. But other than that, we have our summer kind of veggie box CSA, which is a community supported agriculture program where you essentially pay a head for a box throughout the season, whether it's weekly or every other week. And we have now 75 people this summer, so that'll be bigger. And then we're also finalizing details for another program, which I'm super excited about, which is working with the Scott County WIC
Mm-hmm.
program. And so trying to provide veggie boxes to low income underserved populations. And so we're going to do a pilot program this year, trying to build that program out because you just don't have the investment in that going to it. Like food banks are great, but the problem is you just don't get, I don't know, you don't get the freshness generally that you could from something like this. So that's a new partnership as well that I'm excited about this year, and I think it's actually gonna work. We tried last year, but there were just things that happened. So that's a new one, which I'm excited about. So kind of trying to expand outside of just the Prior Lake region and actually get to a lot of these underserved populations too.
That's great, Matt. I love hearing that. Okay, so we got the ground set for where you're at today. Let's jump back because when you and I met 5 years ago, there was no mention of a farm that I knew of. So let's get back to when and how this all started.
I think I have to go back to about 2014 when some of this was planted in my brain. I grew up always liking health and nutrition and wellness and food, and I went gluten free way back in the day of like 2010 before it was even a thing. And one of the benefits there is there wasn't all the processed gluten free food, so you had to eat whole foods no matter what. Like they're just what like pizza tasted like cardboard. I
Yeah.
wasn't going to eat that. But I spent time interning for the US State Department in Paris, in France. Like I had where I was living right outside of my door was a local cheese shop and then a farmer's market that was open 6 days a week. And so I didn't like my fridge space was like a mini fridge that you'd see at a holiday station where they're storing like Red Bull, like no room at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I could store food or anything like that. So I was buying stuff fresh, like daily, which was amazing.
Yeah, the European model.
Right. And so, like, I was playing college football at the time, went into Paris at about 210 pounds and left at 195, even though I was working out more, but my body felt great. I had no inflammation. Like, I didn't feel slow or sluggish. And that was kind of the first moment of, wow, what is going on? Like, why can I eat like 3 times the number of calories yet still lose weight and feel so much better? And so that was kind of my first like aha moment of food is different in the US. And then fast forward, like I spent some time in Tanzania, well, for a year, and obviously that's much more of a local food market. But I ended up working for Sweet Green following that right before COVID hit. And Sweet Green's model is very interesting, trying to work with more local and regional farms. The problem is the infrastructure for these farms doesn't exist. So, like, Sweet Green could be like, oh, yeah, like we're going to source within 500 miles of a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem is there aren't enough farms at a scale that can provide for Sweet Green. So, you're still having to make up for a lot of that quantity that you can't get from just large scale farms.
Sure.
And when you look at the US, especially the Midwest, like these small farms, you don't really have the infrastructure that you do elsewhere in the world because we've just gone to we went to mega farms so fast after World War II. And so that was kind of like our food system's broken. But for me, like I moved back to Minnesota right before COVID happened, had double hip surgery, and spent 14 months rehabbing. And that's about the time when we met, when I was working with Harvey, and ended up growing a small little garden in my backyard. Loved it. Loved waking up every morning and seeing the half inch that the plants grew. And it was kind of the first time that I was at peace in a lot of ways with myself. Like it was just very therapeutic. And my brain works in the way where I just don't do it small. I just go big or go home. And had
Clearly.
zero plan and just kind of took it and ran with it.
So you had zero plan.
Zero plan. There
You
was
started a little
absolutely
garden
no
in your
plan.
backyard that you were just nourishing yourself simply with probably some, what were you growing? Some herbs and lettuce?
We had spinach, some tomatoes, kale.
Okay. So, yeah,
Things that were,
basic backyard farm stuff.
yep. And
Okay.
that was in 2020. And then ended up building a few geothermal greenhouses for some random people in
So hold on there.
2021.
Yeah. That sounds, you made it sound really easy that you just built these geothermal greenhouses. Did you have education in this or how did you come about doing that?
No, YouTube is a beautiful thing.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. YouTube solves all. All right.
Well,
So
and
continue.
it's funny because the first greenhouse we ever built was a 10 foot by 20 foot. And I was like, oh, this is sweet. Like I'm building a greenhouse. And now at the new property I bought, we're building 34 foot by 120 foot greenhouses. So, I mean, the scale of which we're growing now is just insane and compared to just even in the last 4 years.
So these greenhouses that you built, the original ones, where were those located? Was that on your property or somewhere else?
No, so they were on other people's property spread throughout Prior Lake and then down in Le Sueur. So they were kind of, the agreement was we'll put up these greenhouses to trial them, see if this is a business opportunity, and you just have to pay for the materials. So the idea behind the geothermal greenhouses was the fact that in Minnesota, kind of what I said before, is we have a short growing season when you look at it if you're growing outside. But if you're growing under tunnel, you have 4 extra months you can grow, which could equate to, like, for my operation, that's about $25,000. Just at the scale that I can grow now. With that expanding, that could be 50, 60 to $100,000 on the shoulder seasons outside of our main season. So that investment into this infrastructure is huge. And so the idea was, could we pitch this idea of putting up geothermal greenhouses to help Minnesota producers extend the season longer without having to use propane and other expensive heating sources? Definitely was not a viable business option solution or business plan, but I learned a lot And I also learned that I had no idea how to grow anything. And so I was like, I'll just start growing. So one of the places where we built one of the greenhouses, I was able to kind of trial a small garden in 2021. And that's when I was like, oh, the demand's there. Why not try to go a little bit bigger? And then move to the place where I'm currently renting, which is Queen Bee's Lawn and Garden. And that's a nursery operation. Um, and so then that itself has just taken off, demand and everything like that. So.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean, I'd imagine during this whole trial and figure out things work or don't work, what's the internal dialogue with like for you when you go hit these roadblocks and you're like, well, here's a stop for me. What do I do next?
Why am I doing this?
That's a fair
I mean,
question.
I mean, truthfully, like, I think in a lot of ways, like, farming is romanticized. I think there's this, like, idyllic vision around what farming is, in that it's like you're outside, you're working with the soil, like, you're growing all these plants. But I think the reality is way harsher than what it seems. Like, making a living off of farming is not easy. Like, pretty much the only reason I've been able to do it is A, because of the location, and B, because of the unbelievable support I've gotten from the people in the last 3 or 4 years and my parents. Otherwise, none of it would have been possible. And so I think there was, throughout the last 4 years, like, there's always been these questions of like, truly, like, why am I doing this? Like, financially, I'm behind everybody else. It's a lot of work. My weekends are gone for the summer. And so at times, like, you feel isolated. And so, like, at each step, it's kind of like, do I really want to keep doing this? Because it's not like an online business where you can just pick up and move to wherever you want.
Yeah.
Like, starting a farm sucks. Like, it really sucks. Like, the work for it is tough. But I think in a lot of ways, the reward is the fact that, like, the relationships I've built in the community now, like, I just know thousands of people. I can go anywhere around Prior Lake and typically see somebody that, like, is a customer that I've gotten to know. I've gotten to know their family. I've gotten to know
Sure.
kind of their story. And so I think, like, with a lot of that self-doubt comes the positive of, wow, like, this truly is like an incredible, like, communal bond that, like, food and farming brings to people. Um, and so, kind of that whole step along the way, it's always been like that. Really, like, why am I doing that? But a lot of it comes back to, like, the impact and the relationships that you build through it. So,
Yeah. So you'd say your purpose more or less is that it's kind of your service towards others and what you see, how you see it impacting their lives and how it brings them joy. And then the relationships that you have formed in the community are built around what you are growing and doing and building. And it's all impacting people's lives. And you can see it firsthand, through what they buy from you, also from what they tell you, and just kind of maybe even how they feel, how their bodies feel eating off of your farm versus going to a store, maybe buying older produce or buying shelf stable stuff or buying stuff that might not agree with their body as much as what they can get from a farm.
right. And that's kind of I don't know, what I started to notice was, well, I mean, people would tell me just how much better they felt, or their kids are finally eating vegetables or whatnot, because it's like, I don't know. I would never buy lettuce from the grocery store. It's just kind of gross and it doesn't last that long. Whereas, like,
Mm-hmm.
my lettuce will last 2 to 3 weeks and stay crisp and actually has flavor. And so there's just such a difference. Like, I think in the US, like, we just have this idea that, like, food is just meant to be cheap. It's meant to be fuel. But, like, at the end of the day, like, what you put in your body is also going to impact how you're going to be at age 50, 60, 70. And it was very apparent going to Sweden and Norway how different the mentality of health and wellness and prioritizing that is relative to the US. I mean, childhood obesity in Sweden is 4%. In the US, it's like 20 to 25%.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a staggering difference. Um, and you walk around Sweden, Norway, and everybody's outside. Like, it doesn't matter the temperature. Like, there's a prioritization for unprocessed whole foods. Whereas I think in the US, we just do not have that same type of, I guess, attitude towards it. And a lot of it is because it's now been so removed from our culture in the US. Like, where can you go to a farm within 20 minutes of Minneapolis and just pick your own food? Like, you
Yeah, you
can't.
can't.
Like, it doesn't
Right.
exist. And kids grow up thinking that all the food comes from the grocery stores. And so
Yeah.
we have this complete disconnect of what food really is, how it's grown. And so that's kind of where, like, looking to like the impact, it's like, wow, we're just kind of rediscovering humanity in a lot of ways. Like
Yeah.
what it means to be human at a basic level, which is like food, water, like clean water, things like
Hmm.
that. So
Yeah. And yeah, I've noticed you've done a little bit. You talk a little bit about education and how young kids learn food for the first time. And you're working with schools, right? And to kind of integrate some of their education into the farm.
yeah, so we've done a little bit of work with schools, but what's actually super cool is Queen Bee's in the summertime, she runs a kids farm camp.
Hmm.
So they're going to expand to 12 weeks this year, I think. And so there's about 20 to 25 kids per week that come. And they do different farm chores, working with animals. They do different crafts. And then we also bring them down to the farm to have them see how food is grown. They get to taste different things from the farm. So it's kind of like this hands-on, like, learning experience for them, which is super cool because it's like, kids didn't know that a tomato could be pink. Kids didn't
Sure.
know that
Yeah.
like this is how snap peas grow. And so it's just kind of bringing that awareness to all these kids, which is super fun.
I love that. Yeah, it's we getting a chance to, if no one's ever had a chance to do, even getting a CSA box and just you basically get what you get that week, right? Because it's all
Hmm.
dependent on the climate and what can be grown, and
Right.
every farm's got different varieties of different produce. But if it's too hot or not enough water or rain and things are impacted, then your carrot one year might not look like the carrot the year previous, or your kale or your tomatoes or whatever the case might be. And that's just
Right.
that comes with the understanding and the education too, is like things change. The grocery store stuff, produce usually looks the same, but
Right.
you know, that's what the people are used to. But when you are working with the farm like yours, then you can get to see different varieties and they're different sizes, and they're all dependent on climate and kind of how the soil is and all the things that impact that people don't really think about, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. I think if no one's had a chance to be part of a farm program like CSA or got a chance to visit a farm, I'd highly recommend doing it either for yourself or for your family. It's a great family activity, I think, to be a part of a program like that. I like to ask people, and I think we've mentioned it or we talked about it before, but are there one or two people in your life that you can point to as people that you've drawn inspiration from?
Yeah, I mean, two specific people. First being my grandpa. Like, I used to ride in the combine with him when I was little, and I don't know. I feel like there's just that natural bond to a
Yeah.
lot of us early on. And he's always just a very happy, positive person, which I tend to be more of the realist type person. So sometimes I have to think like, how can I be like happy and positive in some of these moments? And then my mom has just been, I mean, she has severe Crohn's disease and she's been through the ringer and back, and to just see her fight and push
Mm,
through, and now her helping out with the farm and being so supportive, like, I mean, it's just, you can't really, you can't really beat that. So,
yeah. Do you think a lot? So when you were young, your mom, she had Crohn's at the time?
yep. Yep.
Okay.
She was diagnosed at an early age.
And she was. Do you think maybe deep down in your mind that somehow impacted you without you knowing it when you were younger, like the importance of nutrition and food that goes into your body, that maybe to help with her with Crohn's, I'm sure she had to pay attention to what she eats.
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely more aware of it. I mean, like we would eat fast food every now and then, but it's not like it was
Mm-hmm.
a staple in our household. Like we never really had sugary cereals. I mean, it was just kind of more of like a treat.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I was having some issues in high school, and then that's why I went gluten free, and it was those two things together of like how to bridge both like her health problems, but also like me dealing with the gluten out like the gluten stuff. So it was just kind of an awareness of like, okay, well, why don't we start eating more whole foods? Like why not just even get better at our diet? Because again, like we grew up in kind of your typical Midwestern meat and potatoes, pasta, heavy carb, which
Mm-hmm.
USDA food pyramid just
Down the bottom
pushed
now?
pushed out the carb diet. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's definitely an awareness around it. So
Good. So I'd imagine where you're at today, you probably feel some pretty great purpose in what you do in serving others, and you wake up every morning with a sense of purpose. Do you feel what's your overall belief in purpose, and do you feel like your purpose could change at some point in your life, and maybe somewhere 5, 10, 20 years from now, you're not doing the farm, maybe you're doing something else, or do you feel like your farm is what's meant for you?
I mean, there's been no plan. There still is no, I mean, there's a general plan now because it's a legitimate business. But I think now that it's up and running, I think it's trying to figure out how the farm fits into a lifestyle that I want.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's where, I mean, the first, I would say 5 to 7 years of starting a farm is tough because you're building out the growing space, you're investing in the infrastructure, you're building your market. I mean, it's typical to any small business. I mean, the hard part is like plants grow and they need attention on a daily basis. And so getting away can be super hard. And so I think a lot of it is trying to set up systems and even boundaries for myself to actually start to invest in the things that I feel like I've sacrificed over the last few years. And so
Such
no, I don't,
as, do you have any
I mean,
specifics?
relationships,
Yeah. Okay.
traveling to see friends, being able to like do things on the weekend and not be just completely exhausted. I think there's a component to it where in some ways I feel like the last 5 years has just been a blur and I feel like it's just been farm, 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 farm. And I don't want it to be that because farming is definitely a lifestyle, but it's also not what necessarily defines you. And so I think now looking into the next 5 to 10 years, it's looking at like how does all of this fit into kind of the lifestyle that I want and the impact that I want. Um, and so it's really figuring that out.
Good. Yeah, thank you. That's good. All right, now for some fun, okay? We're going to do 10 this or that questions.
Okay.
First word that comes to your mind or applies to your life.
All right.
You ready?
Yep.
Now let's go. Number 1, sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Harvard or Yale?
Neither.
Hiking or cycling?
Hiking.
A coach or teacher?
Coach.
Microgreens or micro machines?
Microgreens for sure.
Sleep at night or sleep when you're dead?
Definitely need sleep.
Night owl or early bird?
Depends on the season.
Good answer. Family style meal or plated meal?
God, plated.
I love that. Green tea or herbal tea?
Herbal tea.
Today or tomorrow?
Trying to get better at today.
I love that answer. Beautiful. That's 10 questions with Matt Arends. All right, Matt, let's wrap it up. I want to hear from you, from anybody that's kind of on that trajectory in life where they might be taking their take flight moment at some point soon or thinking about it. What advice or what could you tell them that could set them off into a new path?
I think the biggest thing is there's always going to be people that support you, and there's always going to be people that kind of ask the question of like, why are you doing this? Like, why would you give that up, or why are you going that route? Like, you could be doing this or that or that. And I think it's hard to get these latter people out of your head, like kind of that negative, like, no, like you could be like, there's always that other option. And I think when you're starting something new, there's always going to be doubt from others. There's going to be a lot of self doubt, especially when things get super hard, especially if you're starting a business or something like that. And so I think in a lot of ways, it's truly figuring out like your why around what you're doing, because that's going to be the thing that keeps moving you forward. If you don't have that why and that purpose established, it's going to be way easier to listen to the crowd that's booing you the whole way. And that includes yourself. And so I think truly like being stubborn and figuring out that is going to be the best way forward.
That's beautiful advice. Matt, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate all you sharing your story with us and the advice. And I'm sure people can definitely take a lot of inspiration from you. Going from not knowing anything and starting a farm in your backyard or a little plot of greens in your backyard to doing this huge farm that serves so many people. It's so inspirational. So thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks all for joining Take Flyt, and we'll see you next time. Take care.